Is the document visible now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So basically, I don't know which component you all missed. Uh, can you tell me where exactly did you miss?
Like, sir, from the start of second page, uh,
Okay, from here.
yes, sir. Like,
Yeah, so basically, what I'm doing, I'm just replacing Ki with small xi divided by summation of small xi square. Okay. First part I didn't do because we are not going to do any change in the first part. So I have just left it as it is, but you can do if you like. In first part also, you can replace Ki with small xi divided by summation of small xi square. Okay. Now what is happening? Second part is summation of small Ki square. So I am writing summation of small xi divided by summation of small xi square whole square. This is Ki, so Ki square summation. Then what is happening? As I said just some time back, this will come out of the summation. What it would be? It would be summation of small xi square whole square. That would come out of the summation, and then summation would be added here. So the numerator would be summation of small xi square and denominator would be summation of small xi square whole square. Plus, let us see this component. This multiplied by this. So the first part would be wi into small xi divided by summation of small xi square. Again, this summation will come out of this summation operator. So ultimately, this part would be summation of wi small xi divided by summation of small xi square. Now, what is wi small xi? You see, summation of wi small xi. This can be rewritten as summation of wi, and you know small xi means capital Xi minus x bar. So this essentially gives us summation of wi into capital Xi minus x bar into summation of wi. And you know this part is equal to 0 because summation of wi is equal to 0 here. See, summation of wi is equal to 0 and summation of wi capital Xi is equal to 1. So what essentially we are getting, summation of wi small xi is equal to summation of wi into capital Xi is equal to 1. So here the numerator is 1 and denominator is summation of small xi square. The second part, what is happening? Multiply this with this, so it is basically small xi square divided by summation of small xi square whole square. Now, as you take the summation operator here, I'm basically getting numerator as the summation of small xi square and denominator as summation of small xi square whole square. Right? So one component would be cancelled out. Again, this can also be rewritten as 1 by summation of small xi square. Just check if it is okay. Now this component would be cancelled out. This 1 by summation of small xi square minus 1 by summation of small xi square. Obviously, this component would be cancelled out. So we are left with this component. See? Now this variance of beta star would be minimum only when wi is equal to ki, means this part is equal to 0. Only when this part is equal to 0, then only this variance would be minimum because this is a positive number. This is a positive number. So if this variance is to be minimum, this component is to be 0. So variance of beta star would be minimum when summation of wi minus ki whole square, this is equal to 0, or wi is equal to ki is equal to small xi divided by summation of small xi square. And when ki is equal to this or wi is equal to this is nothing but beta hat. Means when variance of beta star is minimum, we are essentially getting variance of beta star as variance of beta hat, which essentially means beta star is equal to beta. That means beta hat has the minimum variance. That means it is an efficient estimator of beta. Tell me if it is clear. Forget about the derivation part for the time being. Just concentrate on this. Leave aside the derivation part for the time being and see if this logic is clear. Just here. What we are saying, an estimator, if it is to be efficient, it should have the minimum variance. Now, as per this expression, this variance should be minimum when this component is 0. And this component would be 0 only when wi is equal to ki. That is, wi is equal to xi divided by summation of small x square. Sorry. And when we have this, it is basically giving us beta hat. So when variance of beta star is minimum, variance of beta star is equal to variance of beta hat. And also beta star is equal to beta. We can say that beta hat has the minimum variance. It is an efficient estimator of beta. Is it okay?
Sir,
Yes.
sir, why does minimum variance imply that it is an efficient estimator?
See, statistically, what we are saying here, see, for a particular parameter, say beta, there may be alternative estimators, like say beta star, beta hat, etc. And let us assume that both are unbiased. That is, expectation of beta hat is equal to beta, expectation of beta star is also equal to beta. So both are unbiased. Let us also assume that both are consistent. But question is whether they are efficient. Now, what is meant by efficiency? When an estimator would be efficient, actually it would be deviating the least from the center. You have studied the measure of central tendency.
Yes, sir, got it.
What does it indicate? It basically indicates the entire data set where it is exactly concentrated. So if it has minimum variance, that means it has minimum deviation from the center. That means it is efficient. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now let us move on for consistency. Now, what is consistency by definition? By definition, consistency means as n tends to infinity, beta hat would be equal to beta. Remember, this is a large sample property. Right? For this, we are basically talking about n tending to infinity. Now, when beta hat is equal to beta, then variance of beta hat would be equal to 0. If beta hat is equal to beta, that means variance is equal to 0. But again with the condition as n tends to infinity. Now, what is variance of beta hat? We have already derived variance of beta hat as sigma square divided by summation of small xi square. Now, if I divide both numerator and denominator by n, then I am basically getting an expression like this. Now, what we have denominator, in denominator we have summation of small xi square by nothing but capital. Variance of capital X should be different from 0 as per the assumption of classical analysis. If variance of X is equal to 0, then actually your beta hat is not defined. How did you define beta hat? You just see here. We define beta hat in this way. This is the OLS estimator of beta hat. And you see the denominator. It is summation of small xi square. If summation of small xi square by n is equal to 0, that means summation of small xi square is equal to 0. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay. So what I'm saying, when variance of X is equal to 0, then actually this beta hat is not defined. I mean, it is basically summation of small xi yi divided by 0. So in classical linear regression analysis, we assume a finite limit for variance of X. Right? And this is hence different from 0. Therefore, as n tends to infinity and numerator becomes equal to 0, given that denominator is non-zero, this variance of beta hat would approach to 0. And hence, this beta hat is a consistent estimator of beta, because as n tends to infinity, variance of beta hat is equal to 0, what essentially suggests that beta hat is equal to beta. Remember one thing, this variance part of x is very important. As I said in one of the classes, what exactly we are trying to do in regression analysis? We are trying to explain variations in y in terms of variations in x. How changes in x are causing changes in y. So x should have a finite limit to its variance, otherwise we will not be in a position to understand how variations in x are translated into variations in y. So by assumption, x has a finite, variance of x has a finite limit. And given this finite limit, as n tends to infinity, we are getting variance of beta hat tending to 0. That means beta hat tending to beta. And when that happens, we say that beta hat is a consistent estimator of beta. Now what has happened here? I have done it basically for beta or beta hat. You need to do it for alpha hat. And this you do during next 5 days. We'll have a break in this course because my next class is on Monday. I'll again give you some tasks. I won't say task, some propositions to be proved. Like one is prove that alpha hat is an unbiased, efficient, and consistent estimator of alpha. That you need to do on your own, and then we'll have discussion on that in the class on Monday. Second, what you can think of understanding how the variance of alpha hat and beta will change if we change origin and scale of the two variables. Remember, in one of the classes, we basically discussed only up to this. We are changing origin and scale of the two variables, x and y, and we basically try to understand how the OLS estimator of the slope changes, how the OLS estimator of the intercept changes, and what is the impact on the value of R square. And this is what we had derived. We had also seen if these expressions are true mathematically. I mean, this we did mathematically. We tried to see them empirically also. Now let us extend this component. So I just add here if xi star is equal to a plus b xi and yi star is equal to c plus d yi, then what would be the impact on OLS estimators of alpha hat, beta hat, value of R square? These two already we have done. I now add two more components. One is variance of beta hat and second one is variance of alpha hat. How these two variances, how will they change following the changes in origin and scale? And you try to have these derivations at your end, and we will have further discussion on this in the class on Monday. So two derivations. One is impact of origin and impact of change in origin and scale on the OLS estimators variances. And second one, prove that alpha hat is an unbiased, efficient and consistent estimator of alpha. Try to do these two at your end during next 5 days, so that we can have discussion on these two aspects further in the class on Monday. And on Monday, we'll start discussion on testing of hypothesis. I'll start with some distributions like normal to standard normal, then chi-square, T and Z. Did you have discussion on this in the class on statistics for economics? Hello?
No, sir, like not on like chi-square T and J.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm just getting an urgent call. Just give me a few seconds. Sorry. Tell me. Hello.
Sir, we had not done like discussions on like this chi-square T and J.
Okay. So I'll then start with that part. In the class on Monday, I'll start with these four distributions and then I'll derive the respective test statistics. Like we talked about in one of the classes that for testing significance of the overall model, we'll be using F-stat, and for individual coefficients, we'll be using T-stat. So this testing of hypothesis, this part, we'll start discussing on these aspects from Monday onward. And in today's class, I'll basically complete the estimation part. Okay, so two more components we need to focus on in today's class. One is, as I said, looking at some data and seeing how these different aspects can be linked with. And second one is very important concept, though it's not in that way very much related to bivariate regression analysis, but definitely this is a very, very important concept for multiple regression models. That is the concept of adjusted R square. What I said yesterday, this adjusted R square, okay, is nothing but the value of ordinary R square with adjustment for the degrees of freedom. So here we are adjusting for the degrees of freedom. So these two components we need to focus on. Let us start with this concept of adjusted R square. Okay. Now adjusted R square, it can be linked with ordinary R square in this fashion. And you see this is R square minus this. And you can say this is some kind of penalty. And this penalty increases as you add more and more number of variables into the regression model. How? Given n, as you add more and more variables into the regression model, that means you need to estimate more number of coefficients. So as you go for estimating more coefficients, value of k increases. Now you see, as the value of k increases, the denominator goes down and the numerator goes up. That means this ratio increases. And as this ratio increases, you see this penalty, this also goes up. So adjusted R square is actually ordinary R square minus this penalty. And with inclusion of more and more independent variables into the regression model, this penalty increases. This penalty increases in terms of loss of degrees of freedom for the residual sum of square. And you see these degrees of freedom, that is k minus 1, this goes up as k increases. But eventually what happens? Larger penalty is imposed as more and more independent variables are included into the regression model. So you will see across the models, it doesn't matter how many variables you are including as independent variables, you will see R square, adjusted R square value to be less than the ordinary R square, because this part is positive. Only when k is equal to 1. Say for example, you are estimating a model without any independent variable. This component would be equal to 0. Okay. But otherwise you see, as the number of independent variable increases, the penalty also goes up and adjusted R square value goes down. But at the same time, there is another part of it. As you add more and more independent variables, this R square value is likely to increase. So just see this part. You add have more independent variables. Okay, you see this component K is going up, right? That means this ratio is going down. But at the same time, R square value will go up because with inclusion of more independent variable, R square value is likely to increase. So there are two opposite forces. On the one hand, with inclusion of more independent variables, R square value will go up. But at the same time, this, you will see this ratio. This ratio will also go up. This is increasing. Yeah, this ratio will also go up. Now R square value is going up. That means this part is going down. Right, this part is going down. This part is going up. Eventually, how the R square value will change, means to what extent, it depends on these two forces. But nevertheless, what is very important here is that adjusted R square value would be less than the value of the ordinary R square, because a positive penalty is imposed, and this penalty actually goes up with inclusion of more and more independent variables into the model. Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
But again, you will see always the R square value is not, R bar square value is not changing to the same extent, because as I said, it depends on what variables you are including into the model. On the one hand, you are adding more and more variables. This component is changing. It is increasing. Here it is increasing. But at the same time, there will be a change in this. Because with inclusion of more independent variable, R square value is also likely to increase. So R square value means this part is going down. But what is very clear is that this part is positive. So adjusted R square value would be less than ordinary R square value. Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I think we won't have much time to go for the empirical part today. What I can do, just one more thing. I think we can just concentrate on the theory component today. And what would you prefer? Going for the empirical part, or just continuing with these theoretical discussions? Because we have around 15 minutes left. Hello? Should I continue with the theoretical part?
Yes, sir. It's okay.
Okay. So there is a very interesting, you can say, concept. You can say some degree of fallacy also. Like how many independent variables we should include into a model I mean, how to decide on that? I'll put this question in a bit different way. What will happen if we leave aside some important variables? Or if we include some unnecessary variables? What will happen? What would be the consequences?
Sir, the unimportant variables will increase the value of k. So, but the r square will not increase
No,
much.
I'm not referring to this adjusted R square at all. I'm simply saying what would be the consequences for the regression results if I drop aside some important variables vis-a-vis when I include some unnecessary variables into the model?
Sir, the fit of the model will decrease.
When?
Like
In which
when
case?
we like remove the necessary variables.
Okay. Actually, it's very difficult to say which model is the ideal one. It is very difficult to estimate even a nearly perfect model. What basically we try to do, we try to estimate the best possible model. When we do this, two aspects are very, very important. One is exclusion or inclusion of variables. Second one is the choice of the functional form. What you said just now, we don't have the right fit if we drop aside some important variables. Yes, we will not have the right fit that will be reflected in terms of value of R square also. R square value is likely to be low if I leave aside some important variables. But at the same time, if I leave aside some important variables, the OLS estimators would be biased. Because when I'm leaving aside some important variables, those variables would be basically represented by the random disturbance term, or they will be captured by the random disturbance term. And in the process, what will happen? The random disturbance term will not be purely random. So the estimators would be unbiased. On the other hand, if I add unnecessary variables, what we discussed in yesterday's class, I may have the problem of multipolarity. There would be loss of degrees of freedom. And the OLS estimators would be inefficient. So there would be problem of inefficiency. There would be problem of multipolarity and also loss of degrees of freedom. That means selecting the right set of variables would be very, very important in regression analysis. So far, we didn't encounter some such problem because we have concentrated only on bivariate regression model. But the moment we switch over from bivariate regression model to multiple regression model, the selection of exact set of independent variables would be very, very important. And that should be guided by the underlying theories, as I have been telling from the very beginning of this course. Second important point is the choice of the functional form. Again, we have discussed earlier, but how to assume that all the variables will have necessarily linear relationship with the dependent variable. And if we don't capture the nonlinear part, then again, I will not have the best fit. So these two aspects we'll be discussing when we switch over from bivariate regression model to multiple regression model. That we'll do after we complete our discussions on testing of hypothesis. Third important part rather, is basically some areas of application of this regression analysis. And in this connection, we'll be focusing a bit on use of regression techniques for estimating growth rates. Suppose I have a variable y and I have data for 10 years. Can you tell me how can I compute the average growth rate of y during this period of 10 years? How to compute the growth rate, average growth rate of y during this period of 10 years? Hello?
Final value by initial value, and then we can like make divided by raised to the power 1 by 10, like n minus 1.
There is another technique. That is the
Sir, we
regression
can take
approach.
the growth rate year by year, then take its average.
Yeah, that is what many do. I mean, both people do. But here we'll be basically discussing on estimation of trend equation. Like say log of yt is equal to alpha plus beta into t plus ut. T stands for time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 like that. And then let us run a regression. Let us estimate a regression model with log of yt as the dependent variable and t, that is the time, as the independent variable. If we do this, then slope coefficient multiplied by 100 will give me the trend growth rate. That is also an average growth rate during this period. But here we are not simply taking year point to point or year to year growth rate and then making an average of that. Instead, we are estimating a trend equation. In many cases, we do this. Like say, if I want to compare how the rate of growth of GDP in India has changed following initiation of economic reforms in the year 1991. As you said, you can compute year-to-year growth rate before economic reforms. You can do that after the economic reforms, and then you can compare the two average growth rates. But we can also do similar exercise by estimating a regression model. We can also examine if a variable is having acceleration or deceleration by estimating, say, a quadratic trend equation, like log of yt is equal to alpha plus beta t plus gamma t square plus say ut. We can estimate this quadratic trend equation and examine if the variable is having acceleration or deceleration. We can also estimate a regression model and then see if economic reforms have really caused any significant break, kink in the trend line of, say, GDP. So all these are very, very important areas where we can see the application of what we have learned or discussed so far. So next week's classes would be very, very important in two aspects. One is we'll be focusing on testing of hypothesis, and second, we'll also be discussing on some areas of applications. With this, I'll stop here and I'll be very happy to answer if you have any questions.